I'm a strong believer that learning to shut the up is a true gift. And I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of people on the Twitter space who probably should have learned that. This video contains discussions of racism, abusive relationships, acts of grooming, and PDF files, and doxing. If you are not currently in a mental headspace to cover this information or view any of the listed offenses, please understand that you are valued and you do not have to engage with this content. If you'd like, you can click off this video, go enjoy some sushi and a nice cool Sprite, and we'll see you in the next one. Otherwise, viewer discretion is advised. What's up, my sushi rolls? It's Sushi Patty here, and I'm back at it again giving you guys some more content. Today's content actually comes from Twitter, and I'll be honest here, as somebody who hasn't really been on Twitter over the last 3 years, I have been kind of taken aback with the shit that has gone on in the Twitter space recently. I always knew Twitter was like a hellscape, but this tea that I am about to spill for you guys today is unhinged. It's unbelievable. And a whole bunch of this script had to get cut out because I was like, okay, let me be my top journalistic self. Let me watch my mouth so that I'm not causing no debacles. I'm not causing no beef. I'm just going to lay it out exactly how it's supposed to be laid out. And I'm again, Twitter is it's a cesspool. But did I think it was going to come from the VTuber community? No, I did not. Like many other people looking from the outside in, many of us did not know. But aside from all this talking, welcome to all my new sushi rolls. If you subscribe, you become a very special sushi roll. But other than that, thank you guys for coming to the bar. Thank you for listening to my fucking TikTok. So let's get into the meat, the bones, and the potatoes of all of this foolishness. For those of you who are fully aware of what the VTuber community is, where it originated, and the influence it's had on the internet pop culture, you can go ahead and skip this part of the video. I want to make this conversation as open and as understandable for any person who says they want to listen. So I want to be explaining exactly what VTubing is, and then we can move forward. Again, if you don't want to hear about this, go ahead and you can find those little cute, subs things, and you can skip this part of the video. Virtual YouTubers, also known as VTubers, are a subgenre of faceless content creators who use an animated avatar instead of their physical appearance. VTubing is reported to have been around since the mid-2010s, yet our story today is covering the deep, dark underbelly of the current community's downfalls, uprisings, and blemishes. As much as it has presented itself to be not only a hazard to all of whom consume this content, but those who create it. And because this is important, we're going to talk about the people who create the assets for the individuals in order for their dreams to come true. There is a multifaceted industry that allows for people to turn being a faceless content creator with an avatar into a full-time job. They have these things called debuts, just like how if you were in South Korea and you wanted to be a pop idol, it would be something similar. Another term or way that you can refer to your favorite YouTuber, aka VTuber, is by calling them your ushi. An ushi is best described as, your favorite person or your bias. There's a more detailed explanation here on this forum on Reddit explaining the Japanese origins of where this term comes from. It is something, if you're interested in, go ahead and read it. Also, the original document will be linked in the description box below. Typically, if one were to aspire to become a VTuber, you need to buy a model. That just seems easy, right? I don't think so. I'm gonna call it what it is. It's not gonna be easy because many of these models are pretty expensive, and I mean anywhere between $35 to $1,000 for a 2D model, depending on the artist's skill and the work that all comes included. The piece for a 3D model could be anywhere from $1,000 to maybe $15,000, depending on its complexity and its customizations. And simple ones could cost anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000 in that range. While the prices seem a little bit obscure, trust me when I say I've seen some pretty crazy shit. And I know some people who create some pretty expensive, crazy looking ass models. Some of these are more intricate and just well crafted all around. In order to get these models to work, you actually have to have face tracking software, and you also need to have software to actually rig these models. And you need all of this in order for you to just basically move the model around and have it function. If you know anything about VR chat, think something along those lines, but a little bit more technical. So now that you have a better understanding of what it actually takes and what it means to be a VTuber and where it came from, we're going to dive directly into today's issues and addressing the embers that started this basic hellfire here. While Twitter is a cesspool by default, this entire situation it was basically blown out of proportion. In the eyes of myself and many others who were engaging in the online controversy firsthand. Honestly, there were a lot of things that I and many others definitely believe should have happened, could have happened, and would have happened in the conversation had many people who were actually engaging in it took it as seriously as it should have been. You're probably wondering, well, what are the things that you would have done differently, or the things that you believe were not being properly addressed, or things that were mentioned by people in the community? Okay, cool. And this is what I gotta say to that. There was a time in the conversation where there were people who were allies, or people who claimed to be allies, or people who wanted to actually know what the problem was with the content that was being, presented. And it was a lot of people talking. A lot of people who weren't Black. A lot of people who were not Black VTubers. A lot of people who took this time, yes, to use their platform to uplift Black VTubers, but there were just as many people who took their time to use their platforms to speak over Black VTubers. And to that, I say, this is why we had to have somebody like the Gawd come forward and use not only his numbers, but also his personality to get a point across. Many people like to believe that, whenever we're having these conversations, that we're leaving an open table for all to come and enjoy and for everyone to be listened to and to be heard. But in all actuality, it's just opening a door for the gaslighting and the unalivement threats and the discrimination to run rampant. Everybody just all of a sudden wants to become a scholar when it comes to the topic of this conversation. And most of the time, people were only bringing up half-baked opposing views, or they were only listening to respond and not listening to hear us out as Black content creators within the VTubing space. And I'm going to be honest here, many of you during the conversation outright even expressed the fact that there was no racism at all within the community. And the crazy thing is, it wasn't something new to many of us. There is a content creator by the name of Amber Ram who I saw was constantly speaking out on this situation, referring to the VTuber controversy. She hit the nail on the head. She spoke her truth when she said that many of you were basically okay with the racism taking place in your head if it existed, because it didn't affect you. It wasn't something that you were catching strays for. You acted almost like that woman did from Avatar: Last Airbender, basically insinuating that there was no war in Ba Sing Se, which is crazy because there was war in Ba Sing Se. And what's even crazier is there was racism and there is racism within the VTuber community. And it's always seemingly on the shoulders of Black people to speak up about it and address it. But it's crazy because unless we are being flamboyant and we are being very curt and very direct with our speech, we're not listened to nor are we heard. There were plenty of people within the community who admitted that they had been saying some of these things about the VTuber community for a long time. There were plenty of content creators who had a much easier and softer approach to addressing the situation. But you know what they all had in common? They all had to come to the realization that it took somebody with a Malcolm X approach to
allow for some of y'all to understand the true problem at hand. Many of y'all just couldn't see past the fact that some of y'all's favorite oshi were perpetuating and insinuating racial undertones in some of the things that they were saying and doing. Many of your oshi were being coddled and protected for one of three reasons. One of those reasons being, y'all were under the false pretense that many of these people, they're from a homogenous culture. They don't know any better. Are you serious? Are you talking about these public figures with well over 1-point-something million fucking followers? Many of whom also speak English? Many of whom were fully aware of what their oshi was saying and doing? That's a little crazy to me. And it's crazy because many of the oshi that were being mentioned in some of these threads, even though they weren't specifically mentioned by the god himself, these oshi have been in trouble before for the same crimes. And I say crimes in the sense of the public court or the court of public opinion. Many of these oshi this is not their first offense with them saying and doing something completely racially inappropriate or something insensitive. And it's crazy because many of you immediately jump to the idea that, they didn't really mean it like that, or they didn't really say that like that because they had a language barrier. And to that, I honestly lost my shit on a more personal level. As a half Black, half Korean woman, I understand what it's like to witness people misinterpret and misuse both ends of my cultural spectrum. I know what it's like to witness people, be ignorant and be slow about the way people enunciate and pronunciate things in Korean specifically, because people who are also Korean are fully aware in most cases that certain words enunciated and pronounced wrong sound eerily similar to a slur to describe Black people. And it's crazy to me because it's one thing to be skeptical at first because your oshi mess up once, but once your oshi outwardly gets out there and they start saying it and they're now being put on the chopping block for their blatant disrespect and insensitivity, now we want to feign ignorance on their behalf. Now we want to say something on their behalf about them not knowing any better. Your infantilization and fetishization of Asian cultures is what's keeping this conversation at a standstill for many aspects of it. And I tried to explain that to a number of people who were in on the conversation. Many people, as of course, who have also responded to Amber Ram's conversation about how many of these people truly don't get it because they will never catch a stray behind this. They were rightfully so already doing the same shit we already knew they was going to do. All three of the things that I mentioned. Try to say they were from a homogenous culture being exploited by their companies. They were completely and illfully unaware of everything that they were saying and doing when it came to them being only racially insensitive. Of course, because it's okay for you to be racially insensitive, for sure. Not as if some of y'all's oshi aren't, openly homophobic either, but, go off. I mean, it was a lot. It was a lot to unpack. And many people weren't prepared for the fact that they had to do a lot of reflecting about the oshi that they support. And I understand what it's like to have your language taken out of context. And plenty of people have spoken on that and have addressed the god directly on that. And since then, he has made a formal apology and explained to people that that was probably not the best form of evidence used to describe oshi being outwardly racist or discriminatory. And to that, I appreciate that he came forward and said that. And the only reason I say that is because when there's cases of Oshi being called out for something even worse, or directly being the person to have said it, many of them don't even really take the time to acknowledge that, like, they said something wrong. Their immediate response is to be, okay, well, my entire fandom said it was okay because, I don't understand English that well. And how would I know? So you're weaponizing the ability to use your community to say things that are inappropriate and discriminatory and get away with it. Because that's the way it reads off to me. And that's the way it read off to many other people. And it's crazy because, again, these are public figures. People who have a standing with people. People who have such huge, passions for their jobs. And yet they want to feign ignorance when it's time to address very horrific behavior, specifically behavior towards Black content creators. I'm going to be honest here. At this section of the video, I kind of just had to sit down and think about the kind of people who were engaging in the conversation, who really genuinely like to believe that, these Oshi weren't being racist, and that the videos of these Oshi being caught saying and perpetuating these things weren't real, or they took this as an opportunity, as I stated in a much earlier point of this video. They used this as a gaslighting moment. This wasn't a moment to actually hold them accountable. This wasn't a moment for people to actually look up information and realize that some of these Black content creators weren't wrong. And what I have to say to that is, ultimately, what most people wanted was a Martin Luther King Jr. style of delivery. Yet, they couldn't respect it when it was given. They couldn't respect that there were people who are willing to gently educate your Oshi. Y'all were not respecting the fact that people were ready to have open dialogues about the racism within the community. So when you received a Malcolm X style of delivery, you accuse the speaker of being inflammatory, and suggested that anything that they say and do be completely discredited because of their moral character, and not because the message that they were trying to convey held any actual weight, which said a lot about the critical thinking skills and the abilities of people who were engaging in the conflict. And many people also believed in that sentiment. People who didn't even engage in the Vtubing community to begin with also have shown that they agree with that sentiment. Everyone's worried about the fact that what he said was either copied from someone else, or, oh, well, he's a bad person, so anything that he said about this situation is completely irrelevant, and anything that you guys do, like, is this who you're really supporting here? No. Many of us weren't supporting him. We were supporting that he did use his platform, but he opened up the floodgates that have been there for a long time. We were respecting the fact that he was shedding light on the fact that these fuckers who were out here having this conversation were taking this as an opportunity to completely invalidate that there was even racism at all. That's why people were rallying and discussing the conversation. It wasn't because many of us supported who this was. Hell, I personally didn't even know who this was. But I tell you this, I was still very concerned and very involved in the conversation because I know what it's like to be discriminated against in the space. Many people even express how they don't even believe that Black VTubers should exist in the space. And yet, you people put y'all's big girl panties and boxers on and sat here and got mad about the person who delivered the message instead of the validity of the message when the conversation was presented. And so that, I think that's as good as time as any to address the person who did use their voice and they did use their numbers to open this conversation. They opens the floor for everyone to engage. And that person is known as the Gawd.
So I've constantly made reference or spoke about a person by the name of the Gawd, and honestly, they're like the pivotal, if not the entire catalyst for this conversation that is being had. And I'm gonna be honest here, as someone who vaguely engages in the VTubing community to begin with, I did not know who this man was. Like, when I say if he was passing me on the street and he said, "Hey, mama's let me holler at you for a minute," I could not tell you I recognize that man. I'd be confused. I just like Kiki Palmer said.
Don't sound ridiculous. I don't know who this man is. I mean, he could be walking down the street. I wouldn't know a thing. Sorry to this man.
I don't particularly have a really big connection to this character. I really don't. But I do agree with a lot of the points that he's made, because many of these points are the same points that many other Black content creators in any space and pretty much the space of VTubing have stated already. So, I mean, to me, there's not nothing new he was in particularly saying or mentioning, and except for like the blatant attacks on some of these communities altogether, which we're gonna get into it. But I just want to go ahead and give you guys like a little synopsis of things that I found while researching. Like, as far as him being in the public eye, he's been on YouTube and has a very large YouTube community. I mean, like, he has amassed 41.8K subscribers over the course of 9 years, which is impressive by most means, considering most people don't even barely got 100 subscribers. But he's been active in that community, and he's also a really big streamer on Twitch. And when I say big, I mean like he has an impressive 89.1K following. And I can give somebody their roses where they're due. He obviously has a really dedicated fan base, and he also engages in rap music as, you know, a side career, if not his main career. And personally, I've listened to some of his music for the sake of, you know, research and everything. And I'll say it's some of the better shit that I've heard coming out of the VTuber community. Like, I just gotta say, out of some of the stuff that I've heard, some of y'all gotta just give him his roses and call it what it is. He's just better, and that's okay. It is okay to be honest, baby. But nonetheless, as I was doing my internet stalking, or my internet sleuthing, as I like to say, I went beyond the service level statements that were being made in his videos and even towards him in the Twitter space. And I'll just say this. Out of almost 200-something thousand Twitter users who were trying to dig up shit to kind of like discredit him and any of the points that he's made, I kind of took a more journalistic approach to this conversation, of course, because, you know, I planned on covering the case, but it just seemed like much of the conversation turned towards indiscriminately being racist and downright, you know, ignorant towards him. Yet many of y'all are turning around and talking about his ignorant ass behavior in his comment sections and just outright, just anywhere. And many of you were only seeking to undermine much of the shit he had already been saying. Like, don't get me wrong, he was saying a lot of shit that was already fucking available to the public, as you can see here. Like, I'm gonna be honest, if y'all want to go ahead and address some of these controversies, then address them. But in all honesty, I think that these screenshots just solidify my entire idea that some people are just clinically and seriously slow. Because do you know how much of a level of misunderstanding you have to have, and how like dedicated you have to be to invalidate something that was already exposed and something that was already readily available to the public, and then still get mad? Like, y'all are out here writing full exposés on Twitter about him not making new points, and he's just reiterating points that other Black VTubers were constantly being skipped over for years. Like, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if y'all know what the definition of insanity is, but that is the pinnacle of what the fuck insanity is. Like, repeatedly having to do, like, that is crazy on its own. While I can admit, while watching many of his, like, videos, and then on top of that, and like reading his tweets, it just seemed like he was very provocative. Like when he said things, like most of his shit was poorly delivered by all means and intents and purposes. Most of his shit was poorly delivered. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the things that were stated in the controversy that moved people to dislike him even more and cause discourse. There are approximately 5 things that I found, not only from his videos, but from actual people in the space who had a problem with who he was over what he was actually even saying. First of all, he was in trouble because he was doxing a creator. Secondly, he was associating himself with PDF files. Then on top of that, people are saying that he himself was perpetuating racism. I don't have time to even explain the fundamental inaccuracy of that statement alone, because most people need to have a fucking basic understanding of geography and basic literature. So we're going to get into that. Of course, he was exhibiting signs of hypocrisy in whatever he was addressing, any of his own shit. And then, of course, the scamming scandal. I'm not going to be trying to get too much into that because a lot of my opinions are super strong about that. But needless to say, many of these things were skeletons that were being held in his closet. And the crazy thing is, he was very open and candid about the fact that he is not an idol. Like, he is not to be idolized. And he knows that he has done and said some very fucked up shit in his time on the internet and even off the internet. And to that, I can commend you. But there are some very serious and heinous crimes that are being brought up today. So we're going to go point by point and try to individually address them. One of the biggest issues taken by the community was when, amidst the Gawd talking about racism and addressing creators specifically and by name within the community, he released a photograph of a VTuber who many believed had never shown their face on the internet before. However, videos have been found basically alluding that this is not even an act of doxing because, of course, again, I said there were videos found of this creator already showing their, physical appearance. And I'm gonna be honest here, I just feel like there's a lot of people who are misunderstanding what it even actually means to dox someone to begin with. And that matters because you need to figure out whether or not what he did even would warrant being known as a doxing situation and whether or not this could even see the light of day in a courtroom. That matters. And I want to be specific about this tweet right here, made by this user, known by someone you might know. And basically, in this Twitter user's tweet, they state that people still calling him out because he, quote, doxed, unquote, someone, didn't realize that everyone else can make the association to our identity except herself because of the contract. Are we being for real right now? End of their quote. So I had to do some digging into what it would even be classified as doxing and what technically can be associated with doxing. And honestly, if this would even warrant a fucking lawsuit, because many people were trying to be fucking online gangster ass, lawyers and prosecutors all of a sudden, I get that I was talking about how this was basically court of public opinion, but whoa there, let's calm it down. This is not Law and Order. And basically, he's now since edited the video because, people basically butchered him into doing it, rightfully so, especially since, there was beef to that. But let's get into the actual definition of what even doxing is. According to University of California, Berkeley, doxing refers to the collection of a user's private information across multiple platforms, including social media, by an unauthorized individual who even publishes the information in an attempt to shame or embarrass the user. Doxing may be conducted by researching public databases, hacking, or through social engineering. The term doxing is derived from the phrase dropping docs, aka documents. And here is the actual definition here if you guys have the ability to read, because it just seems like everybody in this conversation act like they couldn't fucking read. So again, what most people tend not to understand is that the law is a very finicky thing to begin with. And do I think that if she took it to court, she would win?
Bitch, I don't know, maybe. I don't know. Girl, I took all but a year of law. Like, I'm gonna be honest, it's a big maybe, depending on how good her lawyer is, for sure. And if her agency would even want to pursue something like this, because hell, she could be tried for, saying some outrageous shit that she been saying on the internet, point blank period. That don't absolve her of that shit by any means, but that is a very long, lengthy process, like lengthy legal process. Not many would even want to go through. And it's all over some petty internet beef at the end of the day. And the people being racist, and many people in America don't even give a fuck about that. So yeah, I personally take doxing extremely seriously, like extremely serious, because a majority of the time, people just be doing too damn much. And on top of that, a majority of the fucking thread that was going over this, y'all were not doing y'all due diligence. Like, y'all were not researching properly. Like, my thing is that y'all can't be mad at him for doxing somebody. I mean, y'all can be. Y'all absolutely have a right to feel mad on her behalf. However, this situation is up to them to kind of discuss, because, like, that's her personal information at the end of the day. Like, no matter what anybody says, believes, or thinks, or whatever the hell you want to do, like, him going to her and giving her an apology is completely between them. And I'm gonna leave that where that's at. For the sake of, not getting in trouble with Big Daddy YouTube, we gonna call these people PDF files. Yeah, because y'all love accusing people of real crimes with no absolute evidence. And many of y'all need to be behind bars because of that alone. Needless to say, PDF files are... these conversations have been very prevalent in the online community and fandoms as of late on the internet. And it doesn't matter if you're into the Gawd commentary community, the Smash Bros community, the Valorant community, or any other community online. As long as there are minors allowed in the space, which they have a right to be in if they enjoy the entertainment and it's ready for E for everybody, then there is going to be the expectation that there are going to be some crazy, nasty, dirty, funky ass adults up in this bitch being gross to kids, and it just is what it is. This situation has been ongoing forever, like forever. There was basically this huge Smash Bros event that was going on back in 2020, and basically the Gawd ends up addressing these claims, and he goes on to say that basically, in his document, y'all got this man mixed up with D1. I don't know who D1 is. Again, I don't know who that man is. Neither do you. Half of y'all don't even know who that man is. I'm kidding. But basically, there was like this conference, or like this huge like expo for Smash Bros, and people were playing and competing, and a majority of these people was out here like trying to finagle and finick with these underage people. But of course, if you can't read, then I'm gonna go ahead and show it to you. In the Gawd's document, he goes on to talk about how he wasn't even there. Y'all are lying and y'all are dumb. Is he wrong? Hell no. Because I'm looking at the picture of the man that y'all talking about, and the man who was actually being persecuted for the shit that he did. Like, these two grown black men don't even look the same. Like, y'all really sat up here and tried to misinterpret this information, and it shows. Like, hell, people on Twitter was like, are you dumb? Are you slow? And they ripped into every single person who was just kind of like trying to push this narrative. Like, y'all talk about how y'all want somebody so bad to come forward and say they peep and speak on some mess. And when they do, and they're like, no, this is absolutely false. People want to be like, well, this is, yeah. Yeah, you can't speak English no more? That's crazy to me, because it was so funny watching this unfold on Twitter the most. But basically, in his document, if you gonna go ahead and read that, because that's gonna be linked in my description box below. But basically, he go on to tell y'all, like, y'all are wrong at 2 left feet. Like, y'all lack critical thinking skills to read and fucking research. Because if y'all had looked at the lineup for Smash Bros, which is in our Reddit post, which he adds into his fucking like document, like, he wasn't even on that list. Hell, half of y'all basically said, oh, that dude he sucks at playing Smash Bros, so there's no way he would have been there to begin with. And I'm just like, what is up with this guilty by association bullshit right here in a minute? Because I'm like, these are some pretty serious claims. And it's so wild to me, because it'd be one thing if he actually was engaging with them people and he was still friends with them people to this day behind closed doors, which we will never know. But as far as we're concerned, he told us he cut them off when that shit came out. So y'all gonna have to leave that where that's at. I still can't believe y'all convinced that man that he, oh yeah, y'all running into left feet. When I say that this is the pits of the hellfire, this was the pits of the bonfire, and it was the pits of the bonfire. Like, when we are talking about scamming stuff is really important here, because as an artist, I feel some type of way, and I feel like this is about to change the way that I thought about the situation at hand, because not only am I a Black woman and I want to support other Black women, but I'm also an artist who creates assets for streamers, whether they be VTubers or they be, like, your regular everyday smegular. And I was feeling some type of way when I was reading a content creator by the name of Wolfen's entire address. And homegirl here, she went in. Like, she really went in. She did her big one. And she talked about exactly the fact that he had his own set of VTuber models. Like, here's what she said verbatim. I'm Wolfie. I dated Shizzy. That right there already set me off, because I was like, okay, bitch, please don't tell me some bullshit and I can't support you no more. Because now I hate when people be bringing up their business and their pleasure in the same fucking sentence. At that point, I don't even want to hear what the fuck you got to say. And that was the same mindset as everybody else, or a lot of people. But you know what? I said, you know what? I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt, because this is a sister. This is a sister. So let me go ahead and hear her out. And she goes on to say that at the beginning of COVID, which was 4/20/2020, and we broke up about a year after, I worked on his first model in December of 2020 and started working on the 2.0 model in the spring of 2023 and sent his files over in November of 2023, but worked on additions throughout of December. So essentially, she goes on to show us the model here, which will be presented here on the screen right now. And this is like her whole tweet. And I'm like, oh, so you're not paying your bills. Okay. See, I knew something was crazy about this man, but then I had to reel it in. Because I was like, okay, so now I'm getting a little bit emotional, and I'm not looking at this from every angle. I'm not looking at this like, yeah, because to call somebody a scammer is something really serious. When you call somebody a scammer, you got to have your ducks in a row, and you got to address everything for what it is, and you got to get everybody involved. Like, you got to look at everything for what it is. And so, like any other person, I go ahead and I do my digging. At this point, they going back and forth on Twitter. At this point, I had to check out. I had to check out the entire conversation, because this became something that I knew I didn't want to be a part of. Like, this actually almost made me not want to make this video altogether, because now we lost the plot. I don't care what nobody fucking says. We lost the fucking plot when this shit hit the fan. And it wasn't even necessarily this particular part of the tweet. It was the shit that followed after this tweet in the same thread, talking about their personal Discord messages and their relationship. And that's when everything hit the fan. People used that as a crutch, and they crippled that man and told him to walk. Like, it was insane to watch that unfold, because I'm like, she goes on to express that she didn't have any intent to derail the conversation. She didn't have any intent to use this bolstered moment of, engagement. But at the end of the day, your intent does not trump the result of what happened. And many, and I mean almost like well over 60,000 other people semi-agreed with that. Like, I wish that people understood, like, people was agreeing with the fact that, like, you spoke your piece, girl. Absolutely speak your piece. So what you got to say. And I was a part of that demographic. I was like, yes, speak your piece. But we also got to realize that you did kind of derail this conversation as something that it was, like, completely unhinged at a certain point. Like, as I'm focusing more so on the fact that, like, y'all had an agreement. Like, you knew that the money was going to be funny and the change was going to be strange when you started working with him, because he was your boyfriend at the time. Hell, even when I'm working with my significant other and I'm doing something for him, I'm going to do some stuff here and there for free, but if I say he's going to do a payment plan, then we're going to set up something and we're going to have to do whatever. But it's a mixture of business and pleasure that had us all in a tizzy. And that's where the problem lied with me. Now, she was going on to say how it was disheartening to see that there were women who weren't supporting her and, you know, he was stealing from her. And I'm like, girl, you can't change everybody's mind because it just is what it is. Eventually, it comes out that they talked about everything behind closed doors, and she ends up speaking up on his behalf in this address that is about to come up on the screen, talking about how basically he didn't want to even be the spearheader. He don't want to be the spearhead no more for this conversation. Yeah, I can see where the scam is coming in right now. I can really see where the scam coming in. First of all, y'all, I feel like, okay, so this is what one netizen said I had talked to. They don't want me to put their shit up on the screen, but they said, I feel like this was a ploy put together by both of them. She mentioned how she felt like this was rage baiting and this was meant to, you know, debut his new model. And on top of that, she felt upset that he wasn't using any of his stuff or using any of her stuff. So they got upset and went ahead and put this out there. So I had to kind of take this with a grain of salt because I was like, I had to think about it. And I looked at the document, which we are going to show up on the screen now, about how they actually handled the financial side of, you know, him fixing his shit and making his payments to her. And basically, he came out and said he paid her. And in my opinion, this should have already been done behind closed doors. Again, y'all had y'all's drawers, y'all's shirts, y'all's panties, the whole nines out for the town to see, and then got mad when somebody picked up your drawers and said these bitches stink. I know that seems like a bit much, but that's basically what I got from the situation. Like, he needs to be held accountable, period, for not paying that girl. But when you look at it closer, he was paying her. He was definitely paying her. And these were made in installments of $500. And basically, his payments was going to be sporadic. That was what was stated. So the matter of the fact is, you've been working on this since so long ago, and now he chose a different artist to work with. It just seemed like there was a lot happening regardless. So I'm going to let everybody go ahead and make their own decisions and their own conclusions about that aspect of it, because I don't even want to speak on it no more, because I just feel like that really derailed the conversation. As much as people want to say that they felt like it didn't, I don't feel like enough people were looking at the underlying, you know, shit that was going on. I don't got no beef with Wolfens. I just want that girl to get her money. Her money. I'm worried about that girl getting her bag. How she got her bag, I don't like how she got it, but she got it. Go ahead and get your bag, bitch, period. And that just is what it is. He was scamming. Okay, cool. We addressed that. He fixed his problems. Now fucking what?
This entire situation became a so what now kind of moment. Ever since it got derailed to the extent that it was, and many people came out with their closing statements about the situation and basically insinuated that they were ready to dead it. It was kind of just a shit storm. I feel like there was a lot of things that should have happened for sure. And I said this at the beginning of the video. There was a lot of shoulda, coulda, woulda moments. And I'm going to be honest here. Many people's inability to read, comprehend, and see things for what they are and recognize that there was a problem to begin with was what essentially crippled this entire conversation. There were plenty of people in the conversation who quite literally screamed their lungs out in the most polite fashion that you could see, and they still were ignored. So the matter of the fact is, just like certain creators were saying, you guys couldn't handle the fact that a strong personality came forward to say something. And when they did, they grabbed your attention. They did exactly what they were supposed to do with their platform. And honestly, I hate that this person doesn't want to engage in the conversation anymore. But we can't force them to engage in a conversation, even if they started it.
So from here on out, I kind of want to ask some questions. What do we do from here? Like, where do we go? What needs to be addressed? Well, I think that we should start out by always holding these oshi accountable, regardless of what they say and do. We want to go ahead and have a conversation, then let's have a conversation. Everyone wanted to talk about how there can be 2 wrongs and 2 rights at the same time, or 2 things can absolutely be cognate, like they can be cohesive at the same time. Like, let's be serious here. Like, we was having this conversation for the last 4 to 5, 6 days, and the problem is not many people had the mental capacity to have this conversation and also address several other things all at once. Somebody even had the most funniest tweet and said, I can tell that almost everybody in this community that's having this discussion does not have a fully developed frontal lobe. And it definitely shows. There are people who quite literally came into this conversation with little to no intellect about the shit they were talking about, nor did they actually do any due diligence to at least uncover some of the basic information that needed to be stated about what was going on. But with that being said, please don't hesitate to put in your own comments with some things that you saw that I probably didn't add in this video. And I hope that we can have a cordial conversation in the comment section below. But without further ado, I think I've said my piece and I want to hear some of y'all's. Now, I'm gonna be honest here. Don't fight, don't bite. And if you tell somebody that I told you to do it, I'm gonna lie in your face and tell you that I didn't say that. So, yeah. Bye, guys.